Good morning. Glad to see you all here in good spirits. Let's sing the first and last verse, number 32. Number 32, the first and last verse. How shall the young secure their hearts? We're all young at heart, so. Hugh, would you lead us in prayer afterward? Thank you. How shall the young secure their hearts and guard their lives from sin? Thy word the choicest rules impart to keep the conscience clean. To keep the conscience clean. Thy word is everlasting truth. How pure is every page. That holy book shall guide our youth and well support our race. And well support our race.
Our Heavenly Father, we're thankful for this day and the night's rest, and thankful that we're all doing as well as we are, and we're thankful for this time of the year when we give us think of special things we're thankful for, which we should be doing every day of every year. We're thankful to be here this morning. We pray you'll be with us as we're in this class, and we pray that the things said and done here be in accordance with our will, and we'll all benefit from it. In Christ's name we pray, amen.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Bible class at the Carrollton Church of Christ. We welcome everyone who's watching online or may look at it later. We love and miss you and hope things will be removed that hinders you from being in the assembly with us. I'm going to break one of the rules of a preacher or teacher. I'm going to make some excuses for myself. Our house is in totally disarray. We had a leak. We were gone away camping 4 days and didn't discover the leak for 2 days later. So we have a crew there. I think we had maybe 7 to 9 workers there yesterday. Got these big old blowers and fans, dehumidifiers going. It sounded like a jet going through. And then we're replacing all the rigid copper tubing with that PEX plastic pipe. So physically, our house and everything's kind of in disarray, but Sister Brenda and I, we're not spiritually in disarray. And that's what we want to accomplish by studying the gospel according to John. We're rooted and grounded in the truth, right? I have the sniffles today, so I'm not hugging or shaking hands. I do not have COVID. Now, how do I know that? Well, I had to go get tested because I have a colonoscopy coming up tomorrow. So anyway, I almost called Brother Dave to let him know that I might not be able to teach the class this morning, but I was going to hang in there at the very last. And the driving reason that I didn't call him is after he complimented the people that would teach for him and fill in. He complimented so well, so I just couldn't give it up, you know. If you have a map in your Bible, let's do a little traveling this morning, okay? If you have a map there, and the one I have in the back of my Bible, it says Palestine in Christ's time. And I don't know why I got the feeling that north would be up. In actuality, on the map, it's up is down. So there we are. If we recall, and I want to pick up to where Jesus is in Judea, and he's going to depart and travel to Galilee. And remember, where did he travel through? It said he must go through where? Samaria. It's very unusual for the Jewish men to do that, but here the Lord, he's teaching as he goes, and he has a purpose. He's doing the Father's will, right? So it's the Father's will that he do this and meet this Samaritan woman there. And after that, when the nobleman heard that Jesus was coming to Galilee, he met Jesus there and sought him to come down to Capernaum and heal his son. So Jesus travels from Samaria up to Galilee and travels up to Jerusalem for the feast. Now keep in mind, this is history being revealed too, and it shows the accuracy of the Bible. There's no doubt, when it says up and down, that's the way it was. There he heals a man at the pool of Siloam on the Sabbath there. So, this really upset the Jews, and I'm thinking it's probably the Pharisees. For 34 verses, Jesus rebukes the Jews. As we look at chapter 6 and verse 1, we see Jesus crossing the Sea of Galilee. We don't know the number of the Passovers or how much time has passed before we get to chapter 6. But we can know that Jesus had made his way onto the eastern side of Galilee and traveled to Capernaum, crossing the sea, walking on the water, and by boat. In Capernaum, he taught in the synagogue. Now, history has shown that area has been excavated. There were 2 synagogues there, and that's where Jesus did a lot of his teaching. The synagogue that Jesus was teaching at was later, destroyed, and another synagogue was placed over that. One of the preachers, Phil Sanders, he actually traveled there, and he was able to view this. And do you remember what happened to Capernaum? What did Jesus do in regard to Capernaum? Okay, now Capernaum was a city that Jesus spent a lot of his life in. Remember, he was rejected in his hometown of Nazareth. Even his family rejected him. But later, in Acts, it shows that they did become believers. And that'd be good for our families, right? Even though they reject him at one time, you pray and you have hope that they will accept him in the future, correct? And that's what we do with our neighbors and coworkers and everybody we meet. You pray that they will accept the gospel. Now, I lost my thought there. So he's in the synagogue there, and he taught in the synagogue. And from what I understand by my research, that if you go to Capernaum, there's really not a lot there. But they have found that room, and they're claiming that that's where Jesus taught, in that particular room, and you can go in there. That'd be amazing, wouldn't it? And this is where he teaches about the manna that God provided for the children of Israel. Now we see that God is going to provide in chapter 6 the bread of life for us to eat. And I want us to really concentrate on the bread of life that God is preparing, that will be delivered by Christ himself. Just as the children of Israel died in the wilderness, we can live because of the bread of life, by taking in his word, his truth, gospel, and grace. Now, I have noticed that Jesus traveled, I think, 7 times, going back and forth from Galilee down to Judea. Now keep in mind What was he wearing when he was traveling? What kind of things would he have on his feet? Probably sandals, right? Okay, and it was a custom that there would be foot washings, because I know you probably at some time wore your sandals outside during the summer or whatever, and your feet, they're gonna get a lot dirtier. So it was a custom that, there would be foot washing, which is very proper and helpful for the people. Now, at looking from the points that Jesus traveled back and forth from Judea to Galilee, I estimate it as being between 720 and 780 miles that Jesus traveled. That's quite a trek, isn't it? And depending on the Passovers, it could be in, 2 to 3, close to 4 years, a time period. We don't know exactly how many Passovers that there were. I have not found that. I don't know how many of you are hikers, but it's recommended to have 4 to 5 pair of shoes to hike the Appalachian Trail. The trail is 2,190 miles. It begins at Springer Mountain in Georgia and travels all the way up through about 5 states and ends in Maine. So, I think in the wilderness, what was it? Their shoes and their clothes did not wear out. Is that what it was, Brother Glenn? Okay. I don't know about Jesus' sandals, but probably he wore out a few pair of sandals. And we hope that there were people there who provided opportunity of him, to wash his feet and things like that. Now, as we get into chapter 6, we begin to see the I am statements. I've got that written down somewhere. It's on the back of one of my notes. There it is. How many of the I am statements do you recall in our study in John? There's 7 I am statements. Anyone? Bread of life. That's actually the first one we're going to see today. What else? I am the true vine, right? Anyone else? I am the light of the world. Okay, very good. Any others? I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one cometh to me but by Father, right? The good shepherd, the door, light of the world. There are 2 other I am statements. They're really a declaration of God. One refers to and applied to Jesus himself. Another one, Jesus said, before Abraham was, I am. So we are seeing that the I am statements are introduced in chapter 6. As we begin in chapter 6, let me just get over there and we look at that together. The Sea of Galilee is talked about. Well, the surface of the water is about 700 feet below sea level of the Mediterranean Sea. The lake bed is about another 80 to 160 foot deep at the bed there. Now, the Sea of Galilee, the lake, it's actually a lake. It's a freshwater lake. It's fed by the Jordan River. And it's surrounded, except on the south side, by steep cliffs and mountains. Now, where is Jesus going to go before he feeds his 5,000? Remember that? And oftentimes he would go where? For seclusion, to kind of get away. Goes into the mountains. So on the east side these mountains extend to 2,700 feet. And you think about if you ever gone hiking, and probably some of you have, or you're just out, working in your yard and everything, you have all these obstacles. You have vines, rocks, sticks, and everything. Well, in my mind, I see rough terrain in the air, where Jesus is traveling. I'm sure they have well-beaten paths. And we had those where I grew up on the farm. I lived on a 200-acre farm in Harrison County. It started out, it was just like a pig trail. People went through in sleds, pulled behind a horse or a mule, and then the wagons came along, and then automobiles came along, so they widened the roads a little bit. But you couldn't pass anybody. It was single lane. And then the community started building up. You have your family scattered all over those mountains. And you had little paths that connected. You could walk these paths at night with a lantern. But if you ever used an old-timey kerosene lantern, what happens when the wind blows? Well, you kind of stand in front of each other and you shield that lantern to keep it from blowing out. Because there's a good chance you did not bring anything to relight that lantern. But you could still follow those paths. Sometimes the only way you could see in traveling those small roads would be the moon shining. You could see, after your eyes adjusted, you could see the outline of the trees on each side. But you couldn't see the critters in the woods, right? The black panthers, whatever making those crazy noise, the owls and stuff like that. You couldn't see them. And so, as a little boy, 8 to 10 years old, it was very frightening. But what is the I am statement about Christ? What does he bring into the world? I am the true light of the world unto all men. And we have that today, correct? Now, around the Sea of Galilee, most of the miracles that Jesus performed was in this area. Most of his teaching was around and surrounded by the Sea of Galilee and in Capernaum, there at the synagogue. He also went up to Jerusalem and taught in the temple. Now, he spent about 34 verses there in the temple, really what we call it, giving the Jews a tongue lashing. And they're getting angry and angry and angry. And they have determined they're going to destroy this person who claims to be the Messiah. And with all this information, all the prophecy and everything of the Messiah coming, you're thinking, why can't they see it? Well, what about people today? With all the history and all the proof that shows that the Bible is real, God is real, and his son came into the world, and the death, burial, and resurrection occurred with Christ, but yet they don't get it, they don't see it. Are we any different than the Jews were back then when they denied the Lord? With all the evidence that we have, sometimes our people, still deny the Lord. Let's look at chapter 6 together. I'm just going to read through it and then stop at certain points. After these things, Jesus went over the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. Now, like I say, we don't know how much time had transpired here, nor the number of Passovers. But Jesus has made his way over to the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee from where he was teaching there. So it doesn't really tell us how much time here or how he got to this particular area. And a great multitude followed him because they saw the miracles which he had did on them that were diseased. How many people did Jesus heal? Did he show respect to persons in his healing? It said he healed them all. Well, what about faith healers? Do they heal them all, or they do selective individuals that have been screened and everything and staged? Well, I had an experience on my job. Studying with an individual, and he claimed that he could lay hands on people. He had actually performed healing miracles on people. They had the gift of healing. I said, okay. I said, I know about how much you make per hour. I said, this is what I would like for us to do. I'd like for us on Friday, just ask for the day off, and we'll travel down to Grady. And but first, we're going to go out for a steak dinner, which I'm going to pay. I'm going to buy all your gas. I'm going to give your wages for Friday night. And we're going to go to Grady's to the emergency room, and we're just going to stand there, and you're going to turn everybody away. They don't even have to go. They don't have to go and see Scott. You know, we're just going to turn them away. And then we're going to go over to the Shepherd Center, and we're just going to clear it out. You know? He never would accept that. I said, now, if you have the miraculous gifts, why would you be a respected person? Why wouldn't you help these people who are struggling? But later on, heard someone yelling my name. And he was probably about 100 feet away. He was cursing me as a demon because I had challenged him. That's okay. The other people knew where I was coming from because I was staying with them too. So we see the I am statement. I am the bread of life here. It's going to be coming up. And as we get to the part where he's talking about eating my flesh and drinking my blood, there's some things that I want you to remember. It's figurative language. It's not referring to the Lord's Supper. Couldn't be the Lord's Supper because the Lord's Supper had not even been instituted yet, right? So think about God's grace, the gospel, His word, His teaching from the Lord, and that we have to take in. Just like we take in food and drink, we digest it. And that's what the point is. He's trying to get us to see that Christ is everything, and we take in all His word and His teaching. It's a reference to belief. And let's jump over to chapter 63 to begin with. To verse 63. It is the Spirit that quickeneth, the flesh profiteth nothing. The words that I speak unto you, they are spirit and they are life. Let's look back at 4:14 as well. I'm trying to make a foundation here. Are you there yet? Verse 14 of chapter 4. But whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst. But the water that I shall give him shall be him in a well of water springing up into everlasting life. Now, he's not talking about Jacob's well water. He's talking about spiritual application here. Remember the Samaritan woman? She's thinking physical. He's thinking spiritual. When we get to the bread that we're going to look at in a minute, the bread that the little boy has is probably barley loaves, and that would be the bread that the poor would be having to eat. The richer people, what kind of bread do you think they would be eating? Maybe that light wheat that we like. The light wheat, yes, it would have been wheat bread. I guess the availability, the process and everything was more expensive to do the wheat, so they had the barley loaves. Okay, back to chapter 6. And Jesus went up into a mountain, and there he sat with his disciples. and the Passover feast of the Jew was nigh. I did not find what the first feast was in chapter 5, but it didn't, I don't think it really said the Passover, but this is the Passover. And what was the Passover for? And what did they do on the Passover?
It was to remember the time back in Egypt where God passed over the children of Israel in the 10th plague.
Okay. So each year, each male man who was healthy, available to do it, had to go where? To Jerusalem. And the Passover feast of the Jew was nigh. When Jesus then lifted up his eyes and saw a great company coming to him, he said unto Philip, When shall we buy bread that these may eat? And this he said to prove him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 pennyworth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may take a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Peter, brother's son, said unto him, There is a lad which had 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish, but what are they among so many? And Jesus said, Make the men to sit down. Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down in number about 5,000. And Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed to the disciples, and disciples to them that were set down, and likewise of the fish, as much as they would. When they were filled, he said unto his disciples, Gather of the fragments that remain, that nothing be lost. Therefore they gathered them together, and filled 12 baskets with the fragments of the 5 barley loaves, which remaineth over and above unto them that had eaten. So we see this miracle being performed. You had the multitudes who followed, because of the miracles, and now they're going to experience another miracle. The feeding of the 5,000, that's one of the miracles that's mentioned in all 4 Gospels. Some of the miracles he had already performed include the healing of a centurion's servant, a paralytic carried by 4 friends, Peter's mother-in-law, the nobleman's son, and even with all the miracles, not all believed. And he placed a curse on the city where he did his work. Let's go together and look at Matthew 12, 23 through 24. Matthew 12, that's in the New Testament. And all the people were amazed and said, Is not this the son of David? And when the Pharisees heard it, they said, This fellow doth not cast out devils, but by Beelzebub, the prince of the devils. I think I must have got the wrong scripture. That's not where I wanted to go. Okay. Any comments thus far? Any comments or questions? Well, very good. Now, as we're going through this, I'd like for you to notice how many times, we've already seen how many times water is mentioned, right? Over and over again. I'd like for you to notice how many times bread or loaves or barley loaves and everything's mentioned. I even checked that. I thought it was very spectacular. How many do you think, how many times? Anybody, just give me a guess. How many times it's mentioned in one chapter? Bread. No takers? How about 17 times? Just getting the point across, right? I'm the bread of life. You can't mistake that. 17 times in one chapter. Now, after the feeding of the 5,000, it said that the remnants were taken up. And that kind of teaches us not to be wasteful with food today, right? And I'm sure you've observed, a child slips through, they get a full chicken breast, their plate is loaded up, and then you're seeing it thrown in the trash. Whole donuts. You have a get-together, and you got the person that hosted the get-together, like at camp, you have numerous bottles of water. They've been opened, one sip taken out of it. You have half-full Cokes, cookies and everything just laying around. So you think, American people, we're kind of wasteful at times. Our policies at home, Brenda puts the leftovers in bowls. I either eat them or give them to my neighbor Mark. So I've never been trained, in my life to be wasteful, especially of food. And I just, appreciate so much. But I appreciate more the bread of life that comes down from heaven. The 200 penny worth of bread, there in verse 7. What does your version, if you have a different version than King James Version, what does it say? Philip answered him, 2 penny worth of bread. What does yours say? 200 denarii. Anyone else have something different? Okay. I did have a question here. I'm looking for it. Okay, Jesus said, make the men to sit down. There was much grass in the place, so that the men sat down in number about 5,000. Probably having them to sit down, it was more orderly. They could make sure that the people could be served and that no one would be left out. Therefore they gathered them together and filled 12 baskets with the fragments of the 5 barley loaves, which remained over and above unto them that had eaten. I wondered where those baskets come from. 12 baskets full. Well, I learned that it was a custom of the people to travel with baskets just like we would carry, like a tote bag or something like that, or a suitcase when we travel. Then they would use baskets to do that. Then those men, when they had seen the miracle that Jesus did, said, this is the truth, that the prophet should come into the world. Well, there is another statement, a confession of Christ right there. When Jesus therefore perceived that they would come and take him by force to make him a king, he departed again into the mountains himself alone. And when even was now come, his disciples went down into the sea. Now, their view was that Christ is going to be like a king, like David was. But he was not going to be fighting wars. Wasn't going to be no blood and battles and death and stuff like that. It would be a spiritual kingdom. They really didn't understand that. And he entered into a ship, or they entered into a ship, and went over the sea toward Capernaum. Now that was my wondering, when and how did he end up on the eastern side of Sea of Galilee? Because now he is crossing the sea and is going over to Capernaum. And it was now dark, and Jesus would not come to them. And the sea arose by reason of a great wind that blew. Now, one of the preachers that I got the literature from, he said they actually traveled to Capernaum, and they travel in a boat on the sea. He said the boats that the fishermen would have had, the disciples probably 4 feet height on each side. The boat they were traveling in, it was 8 feet on the sides. And he said it was smooth as it could be, the water, but once they'd traveled for an hour, then the waves, they started seeing white caps and then really waves, and the water, the waves and everything got high enough where the water was actually coming in and getting the people wet. And it said, and the sea arose by reason of a great wind that blew. Well, when those currents come off the Mediterranean Sea, over the mountain and down those steep cliffs, and it hits the warm water of the Sea of Galilee, and that's what creates the waves and everything. And he said it happens really quick, and then it's over really quick. So when they had rowed about 5 and 20 or 30 furlongs, they see Jesus walking on the sea and drawing nigh unto the ship, and they were afraid. But he saith unto them, It is I, be not afraid. Then they willingly received him into the ship, and immediately the ship was at the land where they went. The day following, when the people which stood on the other side of the sea saw that there was no other boat there, save the one wherein the disciples were entered, and disciples went not with his disciples into the boat, but that his disciples were gone away alone. Well, they're just like us. They're kind of curious here. They're trying to figure that out. Howbeit, there came other boats from Tiberias nigh unto the place where they did eat the bread. After that, the Lord had given thanks. When the people therefore saw that Jesus was not there, neither his disciples, they also took shipping and came to Capernaum, seeking for Jesus. So they're still, their motive, they like being fed free. When they had found him on the other side of the sea, they said unto him, Rabbi, when camest thou thither? Jesus answered them and said, Verily, verily, I say unto you, you seek me, not because you saw the miracles, but because you did eat the loaves and were filled. Well, we're kind of like that too. Somebody provide food for us, or take us out to eat. We're kind of all in, right? We like that. That's a good gesture, and we really appreciate that and the fellowship and all. Labor not for the meat which perishes, but for the meat which endureth unto everlasting life, which the Son of Man shall give unto you, for him hath God the Father sealed. Then said they unto him, What shall we do that we may work the works of God? We are accused as brethren in the Church of Christ by other people that, works can't save you. Well, this would give up their argument right here, because it said belief is a work of God, and they do that. Jesus says to them, This is the work of God, that ye believe on him who he hath sent. They said therefore unto him, What signs showest thou then, that we may see and believe thee? What doest thou work? How much evidence do they need? How much evidence do people today need? I mean, they've saw the miracles, they've ate the food, and seen the miraculous healing and everything. Just how much evidence does it take? And for us today, how much evidence do we need? Our fathers did eat manna in the desert, and it is written, He gave them bread from heaven to eat. Now we know that God provided the manna, provided the water and everything for them. Even the clothing and shoes and everything he provided. Even though the people wandered in the wilderness 40 years, he didn't totally put his thumb on them and just bear them down where they couldn't understand why they wasn't going to the promised land, Even though God was punishing them, he was not showing his wrath, was he? I mean, God, to me, he still showed compassion on those people. But, God had a rule. They broke the rules. Unbelief, they didn't go in. For the bread of God is he which cometh down from heaven and giveth life into the world. Then said they unto him, evermore give us this bread. What did Samaritan woman ask for? Okay. They're asking for, I want the bread too. And Jesus said unto them, I am the bread of life. He that cometh to me shall never hunger, and he that believeth on me shall never thirst. But I say unto you that he also hath sent me and believeth not. All that the Father giveth me shall come to me, and him that cometh to me I will no wise cast out. Now this does not mean that people can't fall from grace. That's not what it means at all. For I came down from heaven not to do my own will, but the will of him that sent me. And this is the Father's will which hath sent me, that all which he hath given me I should not lose nothing, but should raise it up again at the last day being the judgment and resurrection. And this is the will of him that sent me, that everyone which seeth the Son and believeth on him may have everlasting life, and I will raise him up at the last day. The Jews then murmured at him, because he said, I am the bread which came down from heaven. And they said, is not this Jesus, the son of Joseph, who the father and mother we know? How is it then that he said, I came down from heaven? So they're looking at it in a realistic way. He's from Nazareth. He's the son of Joseph and Mary. He's a carpenter's son. How can he be teaching us like that? He never went to our schools, right? He's not highly educated. How's he doing this? But some of them get it, like today. Some people get it. They accept the evidence. Jesus therefore answered and said unto them, murmur not among yourselves. No man can come to me except the Father which hath sent me draw him, and I will raise him up at the last day. It is written in the prophets that they shall be all taught of God. Every man therefore that hath heard and hath learned of the Father cometh unto me. Not that any man hath seen the Father, save he which is of God. He hath seen the Father. He just continued, just making them more angry and more angry. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believeth on me hath everlasting life. I am the bread of life. Your fathers did eat manna in the wilderness and are dead. This is the bread which cometh down from heaven, that a man may eat thereof and not die. I am the living bread which came down from heaven. If any man eat of this bread, he shall live forever. And the bread which I will give is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. The Jews therefore strove among themselves, saying, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? Then Jesus said unto them, verily, verily, I say unto you, except you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. Whoso eateth my flesh and drinketh my blood hath eternal life, and I will raise him up at the last day. For my flesh is meat indeed, and my blood is drink indeed. He that eateth my flesh and drinketh my blood dwelleth in me, and I in him. As the living Father has sent me, and I live by the Father, so he that eateth me, even he shall live. This is that bread which came down from heaven, not as your fathers did eat manna and are dead. He that eateth of this bread shall live forever. So we see these statements. Again, verse 63, it is the spirit that quickeneth the flesh, profiteth nothing. The words that I speak unto you, they are spirit and they are life. So this right here really even caused some misunderstanding, and it scared some of the people really bad. Something being presented to them, well, how can that be? How can he give us his flesh to eat? And the whole time he's trying to get a point across. It's not physically eating my body or drinking my blood. That would be, even against, it was a sin to even consume blood in the Old Testament, right? I don't remember what that was. Do you remember any details about that, Brother Dave? That's right, life is in the blood. Well, I can tell you, Brenda's favorite meat is chicken. And so my dad, he would not eat fried chicken. You know why? Well, when you got down the bone, it looked like there was still blood in there. He would not eat that chicken because you could see that blood. And up until he was probably, I know he had great-grandchildren at the time, he would not eat chicken. So he didn't know what he was missing. But his great-grandfather's grandmother. She worked in a fast food store, and they had this deep fryer thing, and it would cook that chicken all the way to the bone. And she started bringing that chicken. I came over one day, he was eating fried chicken. I said, Daddy, when did you start eating fried chicken? He said, look at it, no blood. So the rest of his life, he enjoyed fried chicken. But you know, they just cannot understand the Lord's message. You know, the living bread, the water of life, the light to all men, the light of the world. We're seeing a picture painted here in the book of John. And it really encourages us, right? It teaches us that we can have life everlasting if we consume all of the Lord's teaching. Well, thank you very much for enduring my lesson this morning.